My girlfriend said she needed a break to figure out what she really wants. I said, sure, take your time, but don't cry when you realize what you lost isn't waiting anymore. It started on a night that smelled faintly of rain and cigarette smoke, the kind of night where the city feels like it's holding its breath, waiting for something to happen. I remember standing by my apartment window, the dim glow of streetlights bleeding through the thin curtains, tracing lines on the glass with my fingertip. The hum of traffic was distant but steady, a reminder that life kept moving outside while mine was somehow stuck in this strange suspended moment. She was sitting on the edge of the sofa, her knees pulled up to her chest, elbows resting on them, head tilted as if listening to some private symphony only she could hear. Her eyes, usually so vivid, so alive, seemed clouded, distant, weighed down by something I couldn't quite name, like what you see. Hit like, spread the love by sharing, and subscribe so you never miss an update. I think I need a break, she said finally, her voice soft but steady, as if she'd practiced it 100 times in front of a mirror. The words hit me like a brick I hadn't seen coming. I had felt tension building over the last few weeks, subtle shifts in her mood, long silences over breakfast, fingers brushing mine and immediately pulling away. I had sensed something was off, but the bluntness of her confession still took my breath. I wanted to protest, to reach across the gap and hold her, to demand she stay. But there was a part of me, a quiet, stubborn, painfully self-aware part, that knew this wasn't about fighting. This wasn't about clinging. This was about letting go, or at least pretending I could. Okay, I said. My voice sounded foreign to me, calm when inside I was anything but. Take your time, figure out what you really want. I watched her face, searching for a flicker of relief, of hope, but all I saw was a fragile sadness that seemed to fold in on itself. She looked up at me then, really looked, and for a second I thought I saw regret, or maybe it was a warning. I need to know I'm making the right choice, and I can't do that when I'm with you, she said, twisting her fingers in the fabric of her sweater. I nodded, swallowing the lump in my throat. I get it, I whispered, and in that moment I made a silent promise to myself. If this was her path, I wouldn't chase her. But I added in my mind, with a bitter, unspoken edge, don't cry when you realize what you lost isn't waiting anymore. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat in the dark, listening to the rhythm of the rain as it hit the window, each drop a tiny percussion on the fragile state of my heart. I tried to imagine her walking away, taking her laughter, her warmth, her everything with her, and leaving behind only the ghost of what we had. It felt impossible, but I forced myself to imagine it anyway, because denial would only make the eventual reality worse. Days passed. I kept to my routine, went to work, came home, went through the motions, but everything felt muted, like I was watching life through a foggy lens. I would catch glimpses of her in small, fleeting ways, like a memory brushing against the edge of my mind, and each one twisted something inside me that I didn't even know existed. I started noticing the little things I'd never paid attention to before. The way the light hit her hair in the morning, the faint scent of her perfume lingering on the coffee mug she'd left behind, the way she laughed at stupid jokes that weren't even funny. I clung to these fragments because they were all I had, and slowly, painfully, I realized that clinging itself was a kind of death. Then came the first text. It was short, almost cryptic. Hey, can we talk? My phone buzzed in my hand like a tiny heartbeat, and I stared at it for what felt like forever. My thumb hovered over the screen. I wanted to scream, to throw the phone across the room, to demand she make up her mind, but I didn't. Instead, I typed a single word. Okay. We met at a small cafe, the kind with exposed brick walls and dim Edison bulbs that made every corner look cinematic, like we were both trapped in some indie movie scene. She arrived first, sitting at a corner table, her fingers wrapped around a cup of tea that steamed gently in the cold morning air. She looked up when I walked in, and I noticed the way her eyes darted nervously, like she was measuring my reaction, trying to predict how I'd respond. I sat down across from her. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Outside, the city moved in muted chaos, cars honking, pedestrians shuffling, life continuing without pause. Inside, time seemed to have contracted, leaving us suspended in a bubble of unspoken tension. I've been thinking, she started, her voice uncertain, hesitant. About us, about me, about everything. She trailed off, and I felt the weight of unsaid words pressing down on both of us. I leaned back in my chair, trying to keep my expression neutral. "Yeah?" I asked. She nodded, biting her lower lip, a nervous habit I had always found endearing, but now found unbearably cruel in its familiarity. I realized that I don't even know what I want anymore, and I feel like I can't just be here half-heartedly. I need space to figure that out. I wanted to argue. I wanted to tell her that the space she was asking for could become a canyon too wide to cross, but I didn't. I simply nodded, and there it was again, the unspoken promise I had made to myself. If this was what she needed, I wouldn't chase her. We sat in silence for a long while, drinking our respective coffees, each of us lost in our own thoughts. I watched her fingers trace the rim of her cup, and I imagined all the conversations we would have if she stayed, all the laughter, the arguments, the late-night talks about nothing and everything. And then I imagined her leaving, walking away with the light she had brought into my life, leaving me with only shadows. A week later, the distance became tangible. She wasn't texting as much. When she did, her words were clipped, polite, but distant. I tried not to let it bother me, but every buzz of my phone was a mix of hope and dread. I found myself walking past places we used to go together, lingering outside the record store where she always dragged me for hours, listening to vinyl that smelled like nostalgia and rain. I would stand there, hands in my pockets, pretending to browse, but really just waiting, hoping against reason that she might appear. And then came the day I saw her. I was walking down a narrow street lined with small cafes and bookstores, the air crisp and tinged with autumn leaves. She was there, sitting at an outdoor table under a striped umbrella, laughing. I froze, my heart stuttering. She was with someone, smiling at them, leaning in close, her hand brushing their arm in a way that had once been reserved for me. For a moment the world seemed to tilt. The colors around me drained into gray, the sounds dimmed, and all I could see was her, alive and unburdened, while I felt like a ghost trapped in a room I could no longer enter. I wanted to turn away, to disappear, to pretend I hadn't seen her. But something, maybe pride, maybe the cruel desire to witness what I had lost, kept me rooted in place. I watched until they walked away, hand in hand, laughing like I'd never existed. And then, finally, I turned and walked, each step heavy, the city suddenly too bright, too loud, too real. That night, I sat by the window again, rain tapping against the glass, tracing my own reflection in the dim light. I thought about everything we had shared, every word, every glance, every stolen moment that had felt eternal. I thought about what I had given her, what I had built around us, and what she had taken with her in leaving. And yet, amidst the heartbreak, there was a flicker of clarity, a bitter, sharp realization that sometimes love isn't enough, and waiting can be the cruelest act of all. I lit a cigarette, the smoke curling up like a fragile spiral of thought, and whispered into the dark, "Don't cry when you realize what you lost isn't waiting anymore." And that's when the first real twist hit me, the one that would change everything. She wasn't just figuring out what she wanted. She was running from something, someone, and by the time I realized what that something was, it was already too late to save what I had thought was ours forever. The next morning, I woke up to the kind of silence that feels like it's pressing against your chest. The apartment smelled faintly of coffee and yesterday's rain, the kind of dampness that clings to fabric and furniture, reminding you that nothing in life truly disappears, not even the memories. I moved through the rooms like a ghost, each step echoing in the hollow space between me and her absence. It was strange how one person's absence could make a place so familiar suddenly feel foreign, as if the walls themselves had learned to mourn. I poured coffee into a chipped mug and stared at it for longer than I should have, the steam rising and curling like smoke signals I couldn't read. My phone lay next to me, silent. No texts, no calls. And part of me hoped she would reach out, because hope is a stubborn disease. But the other part of me, the part that had begun to understand the rules of this cruel game, knew better. I had already lost, whether I wanted to admit it or not. Days turned into a kind of limbo. I went to work, sat in meetings, smiled at colleagues, but my mind was always elsewhere. I replayed every conversation, every glance, every touch. I remembered how her hand used to fit perfectly in mine, The way she would tilt her head when she laughed, the small quirks that had once seemed insignificant but now burned into my memory. I imagined her sitting across from someone else, laughing at jokes I didn't make, touching someone who wasn't me. The thought made my stomach twist into knots that no amount of coffee or distraction could untangle. And then she texted, "Can you meet me tonight? There's something I need to tell you." My chest tightened. I stared at the message, my thumb hovering over the screen. Part of me wanted to delete it, to pretend I never saw it, to preserve what little dignity I had left. But I didn't. Instead, I typed a single word. "Where?" She replied with an address I didn't recognize, a small cafe on the edge of town, tucked away from the main streets, the kind of place where people went to hide or to be alone with secrets. When I arrived, the cafe was nearly empty, dimly lit, the kind of shadows that made you squint and imagine things that weren't there. She was seated at a corner table, a cup of tea steaming in front of her fingers tracing the rim in that nervous way that always made my heart ache. She looked up as I approached, and for a brief moment I saw the old warmth in her eyes, the spark that had drawn me to her in the first place. But it was fleeting, replaced quickly by something else. Hesitation, fear, a guardedness that made me realize just how far apart we had drifted. "Hi," I said, my voice catching slightly despite my best efforts. "Hey," she replied, her smile small, careful. "Thanks for coming." I sat down, trying to keep my expression neutral, to mask the whirlwind of thoughts that had already begun to spiral. "You said there's something you need to tell me," I said, my tone even, but edged with an undercurrent of dread. She nodded, taking a deep breath. "It's complicated. I didn't want to hurt you, but I can't keep pretending everything is fine." Her hands trembled slightly as she wrapped them around her cup. "I've been seeing someone else." The words hit me like a freight train. My chest tightened, my stomach dropped, and for a second I felt like I couldn't breathe. I wanted to stand up, to scream, to demand that she stop, that she take it back, but I didn't. Instead, I sat there, stunned, listening to the quiet hum of the cafe around us, the faint clinking of cups, and the soft murmur of music that seemed suddenly cruel in its normalcy. "Why?" I managed to whisper, my voice barely audible. She looked down at her tea, her fingers twisting the handle nervously. "I don't know. I didn't mean for it to happen. I felt lost, and he was there, and I thought I could figure things out by exploring. I didn't think it would. I didn't think it would hurt you like this." Her words were a knife, twisting slowly, deliberately, cutting through everything I had believed about us. I wanted to hate her. I wanted to turn away, to walk out and never look back. But even as the betrayal seared through me, a part of me, the part that still loved her, that still remembered the nights we spent wrapped in each other's arms, the whispered confessions and shared dreams, couldn't abandon her completely. "Did you ever think about me?" I asked, my voice trembling. She looked up, tears glistening in her eyes. "Every day, every single day. I never wanted to hurt you. I thought I was doing the right thing by being honest. I just didn't know how to stop it." I swallowed hard, forcing myself to remain seated, to remain calm. Inside, I was a storm, raging, chaotic, full of questions I didn't want the answers to. I wanted to understand, to dissect every moment, every choice, every lie, but I also knew that understanding wouldn't change the fact that I had been replaced, even if only for a moment. We sat in silence for what felt like hours, the air between us thick with unspoken words and shared history. I wanted to reach out, to touch her hand, to tell her that despite everything, I still loved her, but I didn't. I couldn't. Not now. Not when the betrayal was so fresh, so raw. Instead, I stood up, leaving a few bills on the table for my coffee. "I need to think," I said, my voice steady despite the storm inside. "I'll figure out what this means. For both of us." She nodded, tears slipping down her cheeks, and for a moment I saw the girl I had fallen in love with, the one who had laughed at my stupid jokes, who had held me when I cried, who had been my anchor in a world that often felt like it was spinning too fast. But that girl was gone now, replaced by someone who had made choices I couldn't understand, couldn't forgive, at least not yet. I walked out into the night, the city lights blurring as I tried to make sense of what had happened. The air was cold, biting against my skin, and I welcomed it. Pain, I realized, was easier to bear when it had a sharp edge, something you could focus on, something you could channel. Confusion, on the other hand, was a slow poison, seeping into your bones, making every thought heavy, every step uncertain. Over the next few days, I tried to maintain some semblance of normalcy, but everything felt distorted, like I was moving through a world that had shifted slightly on its axis. I kept busy, work, friends, running errands, but my mind was a constant loop of her face, her words, the image of her with someone else. Sleep became elusive, and when I did sleep it was filled with dreams that twisted reality and memory together in cruel, inescapable knots. And then came the call. It was late, the kind of late where the city feels abandoned, the streets empty, the world holding its breath. My phone rang, and when I saw her name, a surge of anticipation and dread shot through me. I answered, my voice cautious. "Hello? It's me," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. I need you. Can you come?" I hesitated. Part of me wanted to say no, to protect what little control I had left, but another part, the part that still believed in us, that still remembered the nights when nothing else mattered but the two of us, said yes. I found myself walking through the empty streets, the city quiet, shadows stretching long under the streetlights. I didn't know where she was or what I would find, but I walked anyway, drawn by something I didn't fully understand. When I arrived, I saw her standing under a flickering street lamp, her silhouette sharp against the darkness. She looked up as I approached, and for a moment I couldn't breathe. She was beautiful, hauntingly, painfully beautiful, even in the midst of all this chaos. "I didn't mean for it to happen," she said again, her voice breaking. "I didn't want to hurt you, but I couldn't stop it, and now I'm scared. I don't know what to do." I stepped closer, the urge to hold her, to protect her, to somehow fix everything, almost overwhelming me. But I stopped, just short of touching her, realizing that some wounds couldn't be healed with a touch, with words, with anything. Some things had to be faced, had to be endured, had to be survived. "We can't go back," I said finally, my voice calm but firm. "Not now. Not after this." Her shoulders sagged, and I saw the weight of regret settle into her posture, the same weight I had felt in my own chest. "I know," she whispered. We stood there in silence for a long while, the cold air pressing against us, the city holding its breath, the world waiting for something that might never come. And in that moment, I realized something I had known deep down all along. Love isn't always enough. Desire isn't always enough. Sometimes timing, choices, and circumstance conspire in ways that even the strongest hearts cannot overcome. And yet, even as I walked away that night, feeling the chill of betrayal and the ache of loss, there was a part of me that couldn't let go entirely. Because love, once it has taken root, doesn't vanish so easily. It lingers, like smoke in the air, like echoes in an empty room, reminding you of what was and what can never be again. I didn't sleep that night. Not in the way that one sleeps to rest, but in the way that grief and anger take hold, twisting your thoughts into endless loops that make the night stretch like an eternity. I paced my apartment, my hands gripping the edges of tables, the backs of chairs, as if holding on to something tangible could somehow anchor me to sanity. The rain had stopped, but the streets outside were still slick, reflecting the city lights like fractured glass. I stared out at them for hours, my mind replaying the last words we had exchanged, the hesitant glances, the weight of the unspoken things we both knew but refused to say aloud. I knew I couldn't let it go. I couldn't just let her walk away, not entirely. Something inside me screamed that there was more to the story than she was telling, that her actions weren't just the result of confusion or fleeting desire. I didn't know why I thought that, but instinct has a way of cutting through reason, of whispering truths you aren't ready to hear yet. The next morning, I decided I needed answers. I began with the small things, the subtle hints she had dropped in conversation over the past weeks, the oddities in her schedule, the sudden secrecy about friends and places she had once shared freely with me. Each clue, each fragment, felt like a breadcrumb leading somewhere I wasn't entirely sure I wanted to go, but the pull was irresistible. I started with her social media. I hated myself for it, but there it was, the undeniable proof that she had been spending time with someone else long before she admitted it. Photos, tagged locations, subtle references in her captions that made my stomach twist in ways I couldn't describe. It wasn't just casual flirting or an emotional lapse. No, it was something deeper, something deliberate. And that realization, more than the betrayal itself, burned hotter in my chest. I tried to confront her, to demand the truth, but every attempt was met with hesitation, with vague explanations, with that same fragile sadness she always carried. It was as if she was holding back a secret so heavy, so dangerous, that revealing it might shatter everything. I could see it in her eyes, the flicker of fear, the shadow of guilt, but I couldn't reach it, not fully. And then the text came. Meet me, midnight, the pier. No explanation, no preamble, just the words, stark and insistent. My pulse quickened, part fear, part anticipation. The pier was abandoned at that hour, a place where the water reflected the moon like molten silver, and the boards creaked underfoot, as though whispering secrets to anyone who would listen. I knew, instinctively, that this meeting would change everything. When I arrived, the air was thick with fog, curling around the street lamps like tendrils, making the world seem unreal, dreamlike, dangerous. And there she was, standing at the edge of the pier, her coat pulled tight around her, hair damp from the mist, eyes reflecting the moonlight like shards of glass. She looked smaller somehow, more fragile, but there was a tension in her posture that made my chest tighten, an urgency I couldn't ignore. "Why here?" I asked, my voice echoing across the empty boards. She turned to me, and for a moment I saw something I hadn't seen before. Fear, yes, but also desperation. "I can't tell you anywhere else," she said. "They'll know if I'm not careful." I didn't mean for it to go this far. I frowned, confusion twisting in my stomach. "Go this far? What are you talking about?" She swallowed hard, eyes darting over my shoulder, scanning the foggy darkness like she expected someone or something to emerge from it at any moment. "It's not just him," she whispered. "There's someone else involved, someone dangerous. I didn't want you to know, but I can't do this alone anymore." Her words sent a chill through me, sharper than the mist on my skin. Dangerous? Someone else involved? My mind raced, piecing together fragments, trying to make sense of the impossible. "Who?" I asked, my voice barely audible. She shook her head, stepping closer, the boards creaking beneath her. "I can't say, not here. But I need you to trust me. I need you to help me." I didn't realize how deep it went until it was too late. The weight of her words pressed down on me like the fog itself. I had come seeking closure, answers, maybe even a chance to salvage what we had left. But now I realized I had walked into something far more dangerous, far more complicated than I could have imagined. "I don't know if I can," I said, my voice tight with frustration and fear. "After everything, after what you did." She reached out, her hand brushing against mine, tentative, desperate. I know it's a lot, but I don't have anyone else. And I need you." For a moment I hesitated. My mind screamed at me to walk away, to preserve what little dignity I had left, to protect myself from the chaos she was dragging me into. But something in her eyes, something raw, urgent, terrified, made me pause. Against my better judgment, I nodded. "Okay," I whispered. "I'll help, but you tell me everything. No lies, no half-truths." She nodded, relief flooding her features. "I will, I promise. But we need to move. Now." She led me down a narrow path behind the pier, through shadows and mist, to a small boat tied to the dock. "We're not safe here," she said. "They watched this place. I saw them earlier. You have to trust me." I wanted to ask who they were, what she meant, but I didn't. Her urgency left no room for questions, only action. We pushed off into the black water, the oars slicing silently through the stillness, carrying us away from the pier, away from the world I thought I knew, and into something unknown, something that felt both terrifying and inevitable. As we drifted under the moonlight, she began to speak, her voice low, barely more than a whisper over the gentle splash of the water. "It started months ago," she said. They, I didn't know how to stop it. I thought I could handle it alone. But it's bigger than me, bigger than us, and I didn't want you to get hurt, not like this." I leaned closer, straining to hear. "Who? What is it?" She shook her head, tears brimming in her eyes. "I can't, not yet. You have to see for yourself." The boat drifted in silence for a few moments, the only sounds our shallow breathing and the water lapping against the hull. Then she pointed ahead, and I saw it. A figure, half hidden in the fog, moving with deliberate, predatory grace. My heart slammed in my chest as recognition hit me like a punch I hadn't expected. It was him, the man she had been seeing. But it wasn't what I had imagined. No casual affair, no fleeting romance. He was different, darker, exuding an intensity that made the air itself feel heavy. And with him, there were others, shadows that moved with him, silent watchers, their presence a warning I couldn't ignore. "Stay behind me," she whispered, her hand gripping mine tightly. "I can explain later, but for now, just trust me." I nodded, my body tense, every nerve alert, every thought screaming at me to flee. But I didn't. Not yet. Something inside me, the part that had loved her, the part that had believed in us, refused to abandon her, even now, even with danger looming like a storm on the horizon. As we approached, the shadows shifted, revealing a scene I couldn't have imagined. There were papers, photographs, devices scattered across a table on the deck of a larger boat moored nearby, maps with red markings, names crossed out, plans laid bare in meticulous detail, and in the center the man we had feared, studying the materials as if orchestrating something far more significant than a simple betrayal or a romantic entanglement. "What is all this?" I whispered, my voice shaking. She swallowed hard. "I didn't know at first. I thought he was just reckless, dangerous in a small way. But this is something bigger. Criminal, organized, I don't know exactly what, but it's bad. And he knows about you, if we're not careful." Her voice faltered, but the fear in her eyes needed no words to explain. The realization hit me like ice water. This wasn't just about a breakup, a betrayal, a moment of weakness. This was life and death. And somehow I had been drawn into it, whether I wanted to be or not. "Why are you telling me this now?" I asked, barely able to breathe. "Because I trust you," she said, her grip tightening. "And because if we don't stop it, I don't know what will happen next. I can't do this alone. And I can't lose you. Not like this." I looked at her, saw the raw vulnerability, the desperate need for someone to believe in her, to fight with her, to stand against a storm she hadn't asked for, but had been thrown into, and against every rational instinct in my body. I nodded. "Okay," I said, "we do this together. But you tell me everything. Everything. No more secrets." Her eyes glistened with unshed tears, and for a brief moment I felt the old connection, the bond that had drawn us together in the first place, ignite again, fragile but real. The fog thickened around us as we approached the larger boat, and I realized that nothing would ever be the same again. Whatever lay ahead, whatever secrets, dangers, and betrayals awaited, we were in it together. Or at least, that's what I told myself as we prepared to step into a world I had never imagined. A world where trust was fragile and survival depended on understanding things that defied reason. The moment we stepped onto the larger boat, the world seemed to shift. The fog that had obscured everything on the water lifted just enough to reveal the sprawling deck, cluttered with crates, papers, and equipment I didn't recognize. Every surface seemed to hum with purpose, the kind of meticulous preparation that only comes from someone who knows exactly what they are doing, and I realized, with a cold certainty, that we had entered a world far beyond anything I had imagined. She led me to a corner where we could stay out of sight, her hand gripping mine with a tension that made my own pulse race. "We have to move quickly," she whispered. "He's paranoid, always watching, always calculating. If he notices us here, everything is lost." I nodded, trying to steady myself. My mind was spinning, anger, fear, disbelief, and the remnants of love all mixing into a cocktail I couldn't swallow without gagging. I wanted to run, to escape, but the look in her eyes held me in place. She wasn't just frightened, she was desperate, and somehow I knew she wouldn't survive this alone. "Tell me everything," I said, my voice low, tense. She took a deep breath, her chest rising and falling like a fragile bell. "It started months ago, long before us breaking up. I didn't see it at first. He's involved in something I don't fully understand. Something illegal, dangerous, bigger than me, bigger than anyone I've ever known. And he's obsessed, not with me exactly, but with control. He manipulates, he lies, and he's ruthless." Her words hit me like icy water. "Why didn't you tell me sooner?" I asked, my voice trembling between anger and disbelief. "Why drag me into this now?" "Because I didn't know who to trust," she said, her eyes darting over the deck as if the shadows themselves might be listening. "I thought I could handle it alone. I thought I could protect you. But I was wrong. And when I saw what he was planning, I realized I couldn't do it without help. I wanted to scream, to demand answers, but I forced myself to listen, to stay calm." There was a logic to her fear, a structure I could sense even without knowing the details. She wasn't lying, She was terrified, and in that terror I understood that everything we had been through, the betrayal, the heartbreak, had suddenly become secondary to something far more immediate: survival. We moved across the deck, ducking behind crates and shadows. Careful not to draw attention, she pointed toward a cabin near the back, smaller than the rest, its door cracked open just enough to hint at secrecy. "That's where the information is," she whispered. "If we can access it, we can. I don't know. Stop him, or at least get out. But we have to be fast." I swallowed hard, nerves coiling in my stomach. "And if we get caught?" I asked, barely daring to voice the question. She didn't answer immediately. Her fingers tightened on mine, and I felt the tremor run through her body. Finally she said, "Then we fight. Or we run. I don't know yet. But we have to try." We slipped into the cabin, and the air inside hit me immediately. Stale, metallic, with an undercurrent of electronics and paper. Crates lined the walls, papers scattered across the table, some marked with red ink, others with photographs that made my stomach twist. Maps, addresses, schedules. A network I didn't understand, but could feel the danger radiating from each carefully marked line. She moved quickly, scanning the papers, flipping through files with practiced precision. "Here," she said finally, pulling out a folder that looked older, more worn, as if it had been handled in secrecy countless times. "This is it. Everything he's planned. Everything he's been hiding." I leaned over her shoulder, my stomach knotting as I skimmed the contents. The scale of it was staggering. Names, places, dates, transactions. It was organized, methodical, ruthless. I couldn't comprehend it fully, but the implications were clear. We were dealing with someone dangerous, someone who would stop at nothing to maintain control, and someone who now knew we were here. "We don't have much time," she said, urgency in her voice. "He's already suspicious. I saw him earlier, watching us, and if he realizes the folder is missing, we're done." I nodded, forcing myself to focus. Panic wanted to rise, to paralyze me, but I couldn't let it. Not now. I had to think, had to act, had to stay alive. Together we slipped the folder into a bag, careful not to make a sound, careful not to breathe too loudly, careful not to exist in a space where any misstep could be fatal. As we retraced our steps toward the edge of the deck, I caught a glimpse of him. Calm, poised, his eyes sharp and calculating. He moved like a predator, a shadow among shadows, and I realized with cold clarity that he had known we were there all along. "We're going to have to fight," she whispered, and for the first time I saw a flash of the girl I had fallen in love with, the one who was brave, stubborn, and unwilling to surrender, even in the face of fear. We ducked behind a crate as he approached, his footsteps deliberate, unhurried, a predator confident in its power. My heart pounded in my chest, adrenaline flooding every nerve, every muscle, every thought. I could feel the weight of the folder in my bag, the tangible evidence of everything that could destroy him, or us, if it got into the right hands. He paused, scanning the area with sharp, calculating eyes. For a moment, I thought we were done, that he had seen us, that everything would collapse in an instant. But then he turned, walking past our hiding spot, muttering to someone behind him. Relief washed over me, but it was fleeting, replaced immediately by the knowledge that our window of opportunity was closing fast. We waited, silent, for what felt like an eternity, until he disappeared into the shadows, leaving the deck eerily quiet. Then, slowly, cautiously, we made our way to the edge, the water below dark and inviting, offering an escape if we needed it. "I think we can get out this way," she whispered, pointing toward a smaller boat moored nearby, partially hidden by shadows. "It's risky, but it's our best shot." I nodded, gripping her hand tightly. "Let's go." We moved quickly, silently, the boat rocking gently under our weight. She started the engine, and we pushed off from the larger vessel, the night swallowing us as we sped across the water. The fog thickened, curling around us, hiding us from view, and for a brief moment I allowed myself to breathe. But even as the adrenaline faded, doubt crept in. How had we gotten here? How had a simple heartbreak, the end of a relationship I thought I understood, spiraled into something so dangerous, so complex, so terrifyingly real? And most importantly, could we survive the consequences of her secrets, the fallout of his obsession, the truth that neither of us fully understood yet? The ride was tense, every shadow a potential threat, every ripple in the water a warning. I kept glancing at her, trying to gauge her state, trying to read the mixture of fear, determination, and something else, something I couldn't place. Trust, perhaps, or maybe desperation. Either way, it tethered me to her in a way that made leaving impossible. Finally, we reached a secluded dock, hidden from the main channels of the city, and we pulled the boat up silently. She led the way through a narrow alley, the city around us quiet, the world seemingly holding its breath as we disappeared into the night. We stopped in an abandoned warehouse, the kind of place that smelled of dust, rust, and time. She collapsed into a chair, exhausted, and I followed, leaning against the wall as I tried to process everything. "This is our safe place, for now," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "We can figure out our next move here, plan carefully. But we have to act fast. He's not going to wait." I nodded, though my mind was a whirlwind. Safe, temporary. Every instinct screamed that we were far from safe, that the danger wasn't external alone, it was also internal. Secrets, lies, and unspoken truths hovered between us like ghosts, threatening to undo everything we were trying to survive. She looked at me then, her eyes pleading. "I know I hurt you. I know I betrayed you. But right now, we need each other. Please, don't let what happened before ruin what we can do now." And I realized, with a sharp pang of clarity, that this wasn't just about survival. This was about trust, about choosing to believe in someone even after everything had gone wrong, about stepping into the unknown and hoping, praying, that you could make it out alive. I took a deep breath, letting the adrenaline settle into a cautious determination. "Okay," I said finally, "we do this. Together. But I need the full story, and I need honesty. No more lies, no more secrets." She nodded, relief washing over her features, and for the first time that night, I allowed myself to feel a flicker of hope. It was fragile, tenuous, but it existed. And in this fragile hope, I understood something essential. Whatever lay ahead, whatever secrets, betrayals, and dangers awaited, we had chosen to face it together. Or at least, we had tried. The warehouse was quiet, the city outside oblivious to the storm we were navigating. And as I watched her, scanning the papers and preparing for the next move, I realized that nothing would ever be the same again. The heartbreak, the betrayal, the lies, they had all led us here, to the edge of something far greater than either of us could have anticipated. And in that moment, I knew with absolute certainty that the next steps we took would define not only our survival, but the truth of what we had been to each other, and what we could still become. The warehouse felt alive in a way that made my skin crawl. The hum of the city outside muted, replaced by the faint creaks of the building, the distant drip of water somewhere in the rafters, and the steady pulse of my own heartbeat, loud and insistent in my ears. We moved cautiously among the stacks of crates and scattered papers, her hands trembling as she held the folder, my grip tight on the edge of a metal beam for balance. Each shadow seemed to twitch with unseen eyes. Every sound felt amplified, as if the building itself were warning us of the danger that was already closing in. "This is it," she whispered. "Everything he's been hiding. All the evidence, the transactions, the names. We need to get this to the authorities, someone who can stop him before it's too late." I nodded, trying to keep my voice steady. "And you? Are you safe? Can you?" My question died on my lips, because even as I asked it, I knew the answer. Safety was an illusion here. Survival was measured in seconds, in steps that didn't falter, in the ability to anticipate the unpredictable. She glanced at me, her eyes raw, but resolute. "I won't lie. I've been in deeper than I realized. I made mistakes, terrible mistakes. And if he finds out I've involved you, you'll be a target too. But I can't do this alone." I wanted to argue, to tell her that she had already drawn me into chaos by her choices, that I had every right to walk away and save myself. But the truth was simpler, brutal, and impossible to ignore. I couldn't leave. Not now. Not after everything. Not when the stakes were this high. Not when I finally understood how fragile, how dangerous, how intense the web of her life had become. We moved toward the exit, keeping low, the folder secured between us like a lifeline. My mind raced, imagining every possible scenario, every way we could be caught, every trap he could have set, every outcome that could end us both in an instant. But we kept moving, silent, synchronized, driven by adrenaline and something far more primal, the instinct to survive. Then I saw him. He stepped out of the shadows with a calm precision that made my stomach clench. His presence was commanding, terrifying in its certainty. No hesitation, no doubt, just absolute control. He studied us, his eyes sweeping over the warehouse, then landing on the folder in our hands. And for a moment I thought we were done, that all of this, every step, every risk, every ounce of trust we had placed in each other, was about to end in disaster. Looking for something? His voice cut through the silence like a blade, measured and cold. She stepped forward, her hand brushing against mine in a fleeting reassurance. We have what we need. We're leaving. You won't get away with this." He smiled, a slow, chilling smile that made the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. "You think you can stop me? You think that a folder, some papers, a few names, can undo years of planning?" I felt a surge of anger, hot and sharp. "It's over," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "We're done hiding. We're done letting you control us." He laughed, low and menacing, but it didn't reach his eyes. There was a flicker of something there, recognition perhaps, or curiosity, but it was gone as quickly as it appeared. "You still don't understand," he said. "You've been pieces on a board you barely even see, and now you've moved and the game has changed." And then he did something I hadn't expected. He stepped back, motioning toward the door. "Go, take it, leave, but know this, every action has consequences. Every choice comes with a price." We didn't wait for a second warning. We ran, the folder clutched tightly, hearts hammering, breaths ragged, adrenaline guiding every step. Outside, the city had become a blur of light and shadow, the streets slick from the lingering mist, the world moving at a pace that seemed almost indifferent to our terror. We didn't stop until we reached a safe house she had prepared, a small apartment on the outskirts of the city, anonymous, quiet, the kind of place that felt both like refuge and prison. There, finally, we allowed ourselves to breathe, to collapse onto the floor, shaking, exhausted, terrified, alive. She looked at me, tears streaming, and I realized that everything we had endured, the heartbreak, the betrayal, the lies, the danger, had brought us to this singular, fragile truth. Survival was possible, but only together. And in that truth, we found a moment of clarity, of understanding, of forgiveness. Not complete, not perfect, but real. In the days that followed, we worked to expose the network, to hand over the evidence to the right authorities, to untangle the web of deception and control. It was painstaking, exhausting, and every moment carried the weight of potential disaster. But we persevered, and in the end, when the network was dismantled, when the danger had passed, when the city returned to its indifferent rhythm, we finally allowed ourselves to acknowledge the most difficult truth of all. Love is not just about romance. It is about trust, loyalty, and the courage to face the unknown, even when the world seems determined to destroy you. We never went back to the way things were. We couldn't. The betrayals, the secrets, the danger, they had changed us irrevocably. But we survived, and in survival, we found something just as precious, just as fragile, and infinitely more real. Understanding, respect, and a bond forged in fire, danger, and truth. As I sit by the window now, the city stretched out before me in glowing lights and shadowed streets. I think about the path that brought us here, about the choices we made, the risks we took, the people we trusted, and the lies we uncovered, about heartbreak, betrayal, danger, and survival. And I wonder, what would you do if the person you loved most revealed secrets that could destroy both of you? Would you walk away, preserve your heart at the cost of trust? Or would you step into the unknown, risking everything to stand beside them? How do you measure loyalty, courage, and love when the stakes are higher than you ever imagined? I don't have all the answers. Maybe I never will. But I do know this. Sometimes the greatest battles aren't fought in the streets, or in the shadows, or in the hands of others. They're fought in the heart, in the choices you make, when everything you thought you knew has been turned upside down. And surviving that battle, that is its own kind of victory.